Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We'd like to say a special welcome to Kim and to Nickolas Butler. We're really happy to have you here in Europe. Just if you could fill out the forms which are on your chairs, it would be really helpful for us. And also remember that you can buy a book at the end of the event if you want to. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy.
Thank you.
Who's here and who has written this wonderful book that I have forgotten in my bag, which I will just bring up here so that I know what we're talking about along the way.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for coming out tonight. You have to understand that for me it's really surreal and magical to travel like halfway across the world and be invited to a place like this, and I would have been thrilled if like 3 people had shown up, but the fact that you're all here really makes me feel good. And thanks to Kim for doing this interview. Thanks to Florence. Where's Florence? Florence, I'm like the worst person in the world on email in regards to getting back to people with business related questions, and Florence totally tolerated all of that. And this is her last night introducing this sort of series, so maybe we should give Florence a round of applause. Shotgun Love Songs takes place in a fictional little town called Little Wing, which in my mind is based on the towns of Oliva, Strum, Independence, Fall Creek, which are more or less south of my hometown of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. In my mind, Little Wing's like maybe 1,000 people, between 500 and 1,500 people. The cast of characters in this book is, and I'm gonna have to try and remember because it's been a couple of years since I wrote this book, but it's been, so it's Leland, who's sort of like this rock star. He grew up in this small town, but he's become a rock star, and instead of choosing to live in Los Angeles or New York or someplace like that, he comes back to Little Wing and lives there. There's Kip, who's sort of like the early villain of the novel, and has gone away to Chicago to become a commodities broker, and in the early part of the book comes back to have his wedding. There's Ronnie, who is has become like a rodeo star and suffered a massive brain injury, and now he's sort of like an orphan in this small town, and everyone treats him very gently even though he's a grown man with adult feelings and stuff. Beth, who is married to Hank. They're a married couple. They live on Hank's family farm, and Beth sort of has a past with, potentially a romantic past with Leland, and Hank and Leland are best friends.
And he's become a world famous rock star. So he's sort of like the big world out there representing that, but he's also part of the small town. Right. You have a lot of stuff to say about the relationship between the big city and the small town. Mm-hmm. What were your major points there? What were you trying to explain about? What are the virtues and the problems of living in a small town in a rural America?
Yeah, well, the funny thing, for me anyway, when I'm writing a book, I'm not like really trying to attack anything intellectually. I'm trying to tell a story and create compelling characters and create emotion on the page. And it's only sort of after you're finished writing the novel when these intellectual ideas surface, or you can, maybe you were trying to explore them all along, but in a subconscious sort of way. Yeah. But I think what's happening in America, and it sounds like from my limited travels here in Denmark, I mean, America is splitting between urban and rural. All the jobs are in urban environments, but that doesn't mean that people don't come from these small towns, that they don't have emotional links to the small towns, that their parents aren't still there. And one thing that was really compelling for me is thinking about these small towns south of where we live, and why do young people stay put? Why do they stay there? What do they believe in? Because it's in some ways a harder choice. And there's one specific example. There's a small town not very far from our house called Oliva. I think there's like 800 people that live in Oliva. There's nothing really there. But somebody fixed up this old grain mill. They dumped millions of dollars into this building, and with no possibility of economic return, of course, because who's going to shop there? And that was really fascinating to me. Why does a person do that? Is it their own ego? Is it because they have this special history? What is it? So that was interesting. And also the idea of, well, I mean, you know, going to school with somebody like Justin, it probably makes more sense for him to live in Los Angeles or New York or Nashville or Austin or really anywhere else in the world. Why does he choose to come home?
Yeah. The Justin that just popped up here, we have to explain, is Justin Vernon, who is better known as the musician Bon Iver, who is a good friend of yours, and who is sort of a model for Lee. Could we say that?
Yeah. So in truth, he's I haven't really seen him in 18 years, so we're not good friends. And I'm always very quick
Maybe
to sort of point that.
Sort of write it up a little bit.
Well, it's definitely a person could see how, from a marketing standpoint, that's like really, juicy.
Yeah.
We went to high school together, and what everyone knew back then was that this was a guy who was super passionate about his music even then. But he was just like a normal teenager. He was like a goofball, you know? I mean, I remember him getting excited in class and not being able to pronounce his consonants. So he would just be like, hey, and we would tease him about this. And, but he never quit on his music. And then one day you hear that he's made it big, that he's very famous. And that was like a huge source of pride in our hometown, that he never gave up, that he came from an unlikely place, that he could have moved away, but he didn't. And seeing him have that success was really important for me, because the publishing industry in the US is all New York. So coming from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, you're thinking, how am I gonna do this?
Yeah.
You know? But the answer is if you love something and you're passionate about it, you just stick with it. You don't care how hard it is.
And there's a lot of good writers coming from small places in America all the time. So there's it's not a hindrance. It's a gift that you got a place to tell stories from that is not the same as what everybody else is talking from.
It can be, yeah.
There are problems in the small town. You know, jobs are disappearing. It's very hard to make it as a farmer, because it's like giant farms, and maybe like the 2 farms left in a huge area, and the shops are closing down because there's a mall like 50 miles away. So there's some very, very difficult structural problems that we know about as well. But there's also a lot of love for the small town in this book. I see it very much as almost a passionate speech for the virtues of living in a place where you have got roots and where you know people and where your family is steeped in the soil, so to speak.
Yeah. In coming back to Eau Claire, it's been really cool. Reconnecting with childhood friends, high school friends, and one of the guys that I've reconnected with is a wildlife biologist, and we about once a month we meet up for these business lunches where we basically go to a bar and drink for several hours while the rest of the world is working. And he's got this quote on his refrigerator by the American poet Gary Schneider, which basically says, the only hope for the American future is that everyone stays in their own neighborhood, their own small town, and invests in that. And I'm sort of the opinion that, you know, when everyone is going one way, you should go the other, whether that's artistically or culturally or whatever. And, you know, when I was in my 20s reading a lot of books, trying to figure out what kind of writer I wanted to be, I was reading Jim Harrison and Thomas McGowan and Annie Proulx and people like that who were describing a rural America and an America with a vibrant natural world. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, that's what I want. That's what I want to do, you know. And I wish you could see where we live. It's beautiful. My neighbors have a herd of buffalo.
Yeah.
So I just like put the, you know, my wife and I put the kids down at night, and then I take a bottle of beer and I go walk down to the fence line and go look at the buffalo. It's crazy. But it's like exactly what I always wanted, you know? And I couldn't get that in the city. There's all sorts of beautiful stuff and wonderful, vibrant stuff like a library like this or a discussion like this. But there's no buffalo, there's no coyotes calling at night, you know? So.
Yeah, you have to find them inside yourself. But out in Eau Claire, are you treated a bit like Lee in the book? Are you a native son who has made it in the big world? Because Shotgun Lovesongs have been a good success of a book.
Well, so let me start. Let me start by saying that, like, in America, I always describe to people there's like a in my mind anyway, like a scale of American celebrity with like maybe Brad Pitt, and then you know, like President Obama is probably not as famous as Brad Pitt, sadly, and then you know Donald Trump's probably on that level, sadly, and then you know like American football players, American baseball players. Basketball, hockey, soccer, and then like somewhere near the floor is writers. And so, no. You know, some people read my books and they're really excited to talk about it, but you know, the truth of the world is fewer and fewer people seem to be reading books or caring about books passionately. And Leland's a music star, so he's more like up here on the scale of celebrity.
It's a more accessible level, maybe also in the way things are moving now.
Which I'm fine with, by the way. I'm not bitter at all.
Nickolas, now we've heard your voice as a person, and I think maybe it's time we heard your voice as a writer, so that the audience will get even one more step into it. So if you read some of the opening passages here, so we can just get a feeling of where we are.
Sure. So if you've read Shotgun Lovesongs, you know it's told through these 5 rotating first-person narratives, and the first chapter is told from Henry's perspective. So months would pass before we saw his face again, and then he would arrive home bearded and haggard, his eyes tired but happily relieved. We could tell that Lee was glad to see us, to be back in our company. We always gave him time to recover before our lives resumed together. We knew he needed time to dry out and regain his balance. We let him sleep and sleep. Our wives brought him casseroles and lasagnas, bowls of salad and freshly baked pies. He liked to ride a tractor around his sprawling property. We assumed he liked feeling the hot daylight, the sun and fresh air on his pale face, the slow speed of that old John Deere, so reliable and patient, the earth rolling backward beneath him. There were no crops on his land, of course, but he rode the tractor through the fallow fields of prairie grasses and wildflowers, a cigarette between his lips or a joint. He was always smiling on that tractor, his hair all flyaway and light blonde, and in the sunlight it was like the fluff of a seeding dandelion. He had taken another name for the stage, but we never called him by that name. We called him Leland, or just plain Lee, because that was his name. He lived in an old schoolhouse away from things, away from our town, Little Wing, and maybe 5 miles out into the countryside. The name on his mailbox read L. Sutton. He had built a recording studio in the small, ancient gymnasium, padding the walls with foam and thick carpeting. There were platinum records up on the walls, photographs of him with famous actresses and actors, politicians, chefs, writers. His gravel driveway was long and potted with holes, but even this was not enough to deter some of the young women who sought him out. They came from around the world. They were always beautiful. Lee's success had not surprised us. He had simply never given up on his music. While the rest of us were in college or the army or stuck on our family farms, he had holed up in a derelict chicken coop and played his battered guitar in the all-around silence of deepest winter. He sang in an eerie falsetto, and sometimes around the campfire it would make you weep in the unreliable shadows thrown by those orange-yellow flames and white-black smoke. He was the best among us. He wrote songs about our place on earth, the everywhere fields of corn, the third growth forest, the humpbacked hills and grooved out draws, the knife sharp cold, the too short days, the snow, the snow, the snow. His songs were our anthems. They were our bullhorns and microphones and jukebox poems. We adored him. Our wives adored him. We knew all the words to the songs, and sometimes we were in the songs.
So as I hope you can hear here, you really get into the atmosphere of the story very quickly, and you connect with the characters very easily, and it's sort of deceptively straightforward because of course there's a lot of hard work behind writing a story like this. One of the things I was most impressed about is I also work as a music critic, and I think one of the hardest things in books is writing about musicians, writing about rock musicians. It's very difficult. It almost always rings falsely, I think. Even a great author like Jonathan Lethem couldn't pull it off, but you pull it off. So I would like to ask you, what are your connection with music that makes it so seemingly natural for you to write about a musician?
Thank you, first of all. That's a nice thing to say. When I think about it, when I was a little boy, our family would take a lot of road trips, which is pretty common in America. Just load up the family and drive like 4 hours somewhere. And so my parents would listen to FM radio, and you know, they really liked classic music from the 1960s or Motown, and they would quiz me, like, who is this, who's this? And I'd have to say, oh, that's Marvin Gaye, or that's Martha and the Vandellas, or, you know, Al Green. And I loved that game. So I think maybe getting like early sort of positive encouragement from my parents about music and loving music. And then, you know, like in my teenage years, discovering Bob Dylan or Tom Waits, especially Tom Waits. Like at a certain point late in my teens, he was, you know, I don't know if other people really consider him to be a poet, but the way that he writes about small town America is really original and beautiful. So I don't know that I can really like intelligently answer your question. I just know that music has always been in my life, that it's always been important to me, that I've always, like in jazz too, you know, the first time I heard Kind of Blue, that was really important to me.
The pivotal Miles Davis album from where are we here, 1958?
I was going to say 56, but you probably know better than I do.
Something like that. Your Danish publishers even made a playlist. Not really based on the text, but sort of on the atmosphere of the book. If you should mention like maybe 5 records that are deep in your heart and sort of maybe playing a little along as you think about music when you write, what would they be?
Well, Bob Dylan, Nashville Skyline, Tom Waits, Nighthawks at the Diner, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. After that it gets kind of hard. Like Neil Young, Harvest, what else? Then there's like always new stuff, I suppose, but I mean, you know, I don't often draw like a bright line between Bon Iver and the book, but it was important because when I was writing this book, I was doing it in Iowa, and I was away from my family because I was going to grad school, and I was thinking about being homesick for Wisconsin and thinking about what that meant to me and the connection to family and friends, And his music really does, like, I don't know if any of you have been to Wisconsin before, but it really sounds like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It sounds like winter. It's very, you know, and it's so cool that this guy has created something that's so beautiful and artistic about our place in the world that people just overlook all the time, you know?
There's some great descriptions of his of the feeling of his music, of Lee's music in the book as well.
Yeah.
He makes the album that sort of turns around his life and his career when he's actually scraping the bottom, and he begins to make music in a cold chicken shed somewhere, and it says somewhere that the sound of this music was, you know, like the cold chicken shed looking for warmth, or craving warmth, or something like that.
Yeah.
So there is this whole thing about the warm and the cold, the inner warmth and the outer cold that is very pervasive in the novel.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I heard that album was long before he became famous, and my best friend Josh Swan, who the book is dedicated to, we'd gone up to my friend Swan's cabin, which is in northern Wisconsin, and it was like December, January. It was very cold, and I don't know why, we just decided we were going to drive around in his pickup truck, and we went down this, like, there's a lot of logging roads in Wisconsin, you know, because we're always cutting down trees. So we went down this very narrow logging road, and it had just been after a snow, so all the branches were covered with like a perfect layer of snow. And he put in this album. He's like, yeah, Justin just made this album. I don't really know what to think about it, but you want to listen? And we just drove along in silence and like looked at the trees, and it was exactly what we were seeing. Yeah. You know? And it's sort of impossible to write about Wisconsin and not talk about the seasons. We just went through a hellacious winter 2 winters ago where literally, this is going to sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating. There was like a 6-week period where the temperature never rose above -5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which is what in
I don't even know. Stupid cold in Celsius.
Cold, that's fine.
Yeah.
We understand.
Yeah.
That.
But it was like so cold that like you'd go out every morning and start your car, and like it was maybe a 50% chance your car was going to start. You could do the whole thing where you take a cup of coffee and throw it in the air, and it froze before it hit the ground. It was, and that was the same winter the New York. You know, the book came out, the New York Times came to my house to do this video, and I thought, oh, I'll walk around the land and show the New York Times guy what it's like, and the snow was up past my ass, and so of course I'm like, and I'm kind of out of shape, so I'm like, oh my God, this is hard work. My friends from Wisconsin are like, why don't you have snowshoes? What idiot would go out like that? But
I don't know how many of you know the music of Bon Iver, Bon Iver. It's quite a lot. For those of you who don't, the last music that was being played just before we went on stage was that. So maybe at some point we should just take 1 minute of it, maybe, so that we get the feeling of it. The title of the novel he makes is Shotgun Lovesongs, which is, I would like to know, what is this title? I know what a shotgun wedding is. That's when somebody puts the father of the bride tells you, you are going to get married now, or I'll blow your head off.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, basically in the book, when Leland is describing making that album, you know, that's just me describing writing this book. All during my 20s, I had worked this really terrible string of jobs. A lot of the jobs were, you know, physically dangerous, more like just kind of from a morale standpoint, like really difficult to wake up in the morning and go work at a meat packing facility where there's like blood on the ground and it's cold, and it's not because I don't think it's because I was a dumb person that I was working these jobs. I think I had kind of bad luck. And so when I got my chance to go to the Iowa Writers Workshop, you know, my wife and I had just had our first child, and I just went into that with huge intensity. I was not screwing around at all. I used all my time effectively. I was thinking about everything. I was sponging in everything I could learn. And I was really afraid that I would come out of Iowa and not have a book and have to go back to working a terrible job. And I didn't want to do that at all. I mean, I really didn't. So I don't really know anything about music. I don't know anything about making an album. I don't know what Justin went through. But I felt like somebody had a shotgun at my back. You know, but it was me. Well, and you know, so there's that. The practical thing was I didn't have a title for the longest time. And then we sort of started, like, this project got kind of long, and my agent was like, well, what are we going to call it? And I said, I don't know. And then he started kind of suggesting titles, but they were all really lame. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to, like, you know, there's a lot of weddings in this book, and I could just see him titling it like The Good Man or The Good Men.
4 weddings and no funeral.
Right, no, 4 weddings and no funeral. I was aware of that too, so one day I started, like, working out different like permutations of a title, and it worked perfectly. I think I actually wrote that chapter almost at the end. Because I would write chapters in not a linear sequence. Plus, I mean, and this is touchy amidst all of America's gun violence, but I've always enjoyed shooting trap clay pigeons. So, like, I like shotguns. And in America, when you take a road trip, you call shotgun, shotgun weddings, shotgun microphones when you don't have much money. So there's, like, it's a great word, you know?
You ride shotgun?
Right, you ride shotgun,
But why books? If you had this hunger of expressing yourself and getting away from all the shit jobs.
Like, maybe that's not the best idea, or?
No, but why? No. But why books? Why not music? Why films? You know, in this day and age, if you want to be, if you want to make it big and you want to get out and make some money, you don't choose to write books. That's really a silly option.
Probably. Well, I have no musical talent at all, so music's out. I'm from Wisconsin, which means I have, like, no Hollywood connections whatsoever. I'm not wealthy, so I can't, like, produce my own film or something. What else was there?
So it all whittles down.
But there was, like, a moment when I was 28, I think, when Regina got pregnant with our first kid, and I was working at a liquor store. I was making $8 an hour. We were on state benefits because we were really poor at the time. And I just sort of had a conversation with myself, like, okay, let's do an inventory. Like, what are you kind of good at? And the only thing that I could think of was writing, because writing had always been around in my life. People had always given me positive feedback on my writing. And I thought, I'm going to do everything I can to be the best writer that I can be. So I took a workshop with a novelist who was sort of a friend of mine, and I wrote 2 short stories. And he was like, these are fantastic. You know, you should apply to graduate school. So I applied to graduate school the first year, got shut out. And I kept working, applied again, and then I got into Iowa. And once that happened, the world sort of opened up, and I gained access to the book publishing world, you know. But it basically comes down to the fact I don't really have much talent in anything else.